The dust cloud on the horizon caught Theodora Sullivan's attention as she stood outside the stagecoach station. Her pristine white wedding dress, now a collection of stains and tears, fluttering in the warm Arizona breeze. She had fled Philadelphia with nothing but this dress and a small carpetbag containing her life's savings. Her intended husband, now mercifully hundreds of miles away, would never find her here in the untamed frontier of Copper Canyon. It was August 1878, and the relentless summer sun beat down on Theodora's fair skin. The stagecoach that had brought her this far had departed hours ago, leaving her stranded at this remote outpost with no clear plan forward. The small trading post consisted of little more than a weathered wooden building, a water trough, and a hitching post. The proprietor had vanished inside after informing her that the next stage wouldn't arrive for another 3 days. As the dust cloud grew larger, Theodora could make out the silhouette of a lone rider approaching. Her heart raced. She had heard stories about the dangers that awaited unaccompanied women in the West. She clutched her carpetbag tighter, considering whether to retreat inside the station or stand her ground. The rider slowed his horse as he approached, a magnificent chestnut stallion that seemed as wild as the land itself. The man atop it was tall, broad-shouldered, his face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. His clothes were worn but well-kept faded denim pants, a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up revealing tanned, muscular forearms, and a leather vest that had seen better days. "Madam," he said simply, tipping his hat as he dismounted with an easy grace that spoke of a lifetime spent in the saddle. His eyes, a striking shade of blue, widened slightly as they took in her disheveled wedding gown. "Are you lost?" he asked, his voice deep and resonant with a slight Western drawl. Theodora straightened her spine, determined not to appear as vulnerable as she felt. "No, sir, I am precisely where I intended to be." The man's lips quirked upwards slightly. "And where might that be?" "Because unless you're planning to marry old Jim who runs this station, and I wouldn't recommend it, madam. He hasn't bathed since the war then I reckon you might be a bit off course." Heat rose to Theodora's cheeks. "I'm headed to Copper Canyon. I'm told there's work there for a schoolteacher." The man nodded slowly, appraising her with newfound interest. "That'd be about 20 miles northwest of here, too far to walk, especially in." His eyes traveled down to her once beautiful gown, now covered in the red dust of the territory. "Your current attire." Theodora's chin lifted defiantly. "I'm aware of the impracticality of my clothing, sir. Unfortunately, circumstances did not allow me to pack more appropriately." The man's expression softened. "Name's Isaac Walsh. I own a ranch outside of Copper Canyon. I'd be happy to escort you there, miss." "Sullivan, Theodora Sullivan." She hesitated before adding, "And I thank you for your offer, Mr. Walsh, but I cannot accept rides from men I do not know." Isaac removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Miss Sullivan, I understand your caution, but you've got limited options out here. The stage won't be back for days, and there's not much between here and town except open country and the occasional bandit." As if to emphasize his point, a rumble of thunder sounded in the distance. Isaac glanced at the darkening sky to the west. Storms coming too. Flash floods are common this time of year. Theodora looked around at the barren landscape, recognizing the truth in his words. She was utterly alone with no alternatives. "I give you my word as a gentleman," Isaac continued. "I'll see you safely to town. My sister Martha runs the boarding house there. She can help you get settled." After a moment's consideration, Theodora nodded. "Very well, Mr. Walsh, I accept your kind offer." Isaac smiled, revealing straight white teeth that contrasted with his sun-darkened skin. "Well then, let's get going before that storm catches us." He eyed her dress again, and a thoughtful expression crossed his face. "That dress is going to make riding difficult." Theodora's face flushed again. "I have nothing else." Isaac shrugged off his concern with an easy smile. "You can wear anything you want here, Miss Sullivan. The territory doesn't stand on ceremony like the East." He disappeared into the station and returned minutes later with a bundle of fabric. "Old Jim keeps spare clothes for emergencies. They'll be too big, but they'll be more comfortable for the ride." Theodora took the offered clothing, a man's cotton shirt and trousers, and ducked behind the building to change. She felt scandalous removing her wedding dress, even more so donning men's clothing. But as she emerged, the relief of wearing something practical outweighed her embarrassment. Isaac was waiting, holding the reins of his horse. His eyes widened momentarily when he saw her, but he quickly recovered. "You look ready for the territory now," he said with a smile. He helped her secure her wedding dress and carpet bag behind the saddle. "I'm afraid we'll need to ride double," Isaac said. "Phoenix here is strong, but we should get another mount for you once we reach town." Before Theodora could respond, Isaac lifted her effortlessly onto the horse, then swung up behind her. The closeness of their bodies made her tense, but she had no choice but to accept this unexpected intimacy. "Hold on," he instructed, reaching around her to take the reins. His arms formed a protective circle around her, and despite her misgivings, Theodora felt safer than she had in months. As they rode away from the station, the impending storm at their backs, Theodora wondered what awaited her in Copper Canyon, and why the steady heartbeat of the stranger behind her felt so oddly comforting. The ride to Copper Canyon proved more challenging than Theodora had anticipated. The borrowed clothes chafed against her skin, and sitting astride a horse, something she'd never done before, strained muscles she hadn't known existed. Yet there was a freedom in the experience that she found intoxicating. The vast landscape spread out before them, painted in shades of rust and gold, with mountains rising purple in the distance. "How long have you been in the territory, Mr. Walsh?" Theodora asked, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. "Call me Isaac," he replied, his voice close to her ear. "I came out here after the war, 15 years now, started with nothing but Phoenix here and the clothes on my back. And now you have a ranch. 30 acres, 50 head of cattle, and the best horse stock this side of the Mississippi," he said with unmistakable pride. "It's not the biggest spread, but it's mine. You built it yourself. Every fence post and floorboard," Isaac confirmed. "The land rewards those who work it, Miss Sullivan." "Theodora, please," she offered, surprising herself with the informality. Isaac's chuckle rumbled against her back. "Theodora it is." The first fat drops of rain began to fall as the wind picked up, carrying the scent of wet sage and distant lightning. "We need to find shelter," Isaac said, scanning the horizon. "There's an old line shack about a mile from here. We can wait out the worst of it there." He guided Phoenix off the trail and toward a stand of cottonwoods visible in the distance. By the time they reached the small wooden structure, the rain was falling in earnest, drumming against the weathered roof. Isaac dismounted first, then reached up to help Theodora down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground, and Isaac's strong hands steadied her at the waist. "First time on horseback will do that," he said with a knowing smile. "It gets easier." Inside, the line shack was Spartan but clean, a single room with a small iron stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a narrow cot pushed against one wall. Isaac busied himself lighting the stove while Theodora stood awkwardly by the door, suddenly very aware of her inappropriate attire and their isolation. "I should check on Phoenix," Isaac said once the fire was crackling. He grabbed a slicker hanging by the door and disappeared outside. Theodora took the opportunity to explore the small space. A shelf held a few canned goods and coffee. She found matches and lit the oil lamp on the table, casting a warm glow throughout the room. Outside, the storm had intensified, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling through the eaves. Isaac returned, water streaming from his hat and coat. "Phoenix is tucked away in the lean-to," he reported, hanging his wet outer garments by the stove. "Storm's getting worse. We might be here a while." Theodora nodded, trying not to show her discomfort at the situation. Being alone with a man in such close quarters went against every social convention she'd been taught. "You're from back east," Isaac stated rather than asked as he poured water from a canteen into a small pot for coffee. "Philadelphia," Theodora confirmed. "My father was a professor at the university." He passed away 6 months ago," she said, the familiar pang of grief tightening her throat. "Pneumonia." "I'm sorry," Isaac said, genuine sympathy in his voice. "And your mother, gone many years now. Isaac nodded, understanding in his eyes. So you came west to start fresh. Something like that, Theodora replied, not ready to share the full story of her hasty departure, of how her father's death had left her at the mercy of her guardian. Her father's colleague, Professor Edwin Hargrove, who had quickly made his intentions clear. The same man she had left at the altar 3 days ago. The West is good for new beginnings, Isaac said, seeming to sense her reluctance to elaborate. No one here cares much about your past, it's what you do now that matters. The coffee began to boil, and Isaac poured 2 cups, handing one to Theodora. The bitter warmth was welcome after their chilly, damp ride. So you're to be Copper Canyon's new schoolteacher, Isaac said, settling into one of the chairs. The town's been looking for someone since Miss Jenkins eloped with a cattle buyer last spring. I have experience, Theodora assured him. I assisted my father with his students and tutored children of Philadelphia's society families. I don't doubt your qualifications, Isaac said with a small smile. But teaching out here is different. You'll have children from ranching families who have never seen the inside of a proper classroom, mixed with merchant kids and a few from the mining camps. Children are children, Theodora replied confidently. All of them deserve an education. Isaac's expression warmed. That's the right attitude. The town council will appreciate your enthusiasm. As the storm raged outside, they continued talking. Isaac told her about Copper Canyon, a growing town that had sprung up around silver mining operations, but was now transitioning to a ranching and farming community as the mines played out. He spoke of his neighbors, the seasonal rhythms of ranch life, and his hopes to expand his horse breeding operation. In turn, Theodora shared stories of Philadelphia, her love of literature and music, and her father's passionate belief in education for all, regardless of gender or background. What she didn't mention was Edwin's cruel manipulation after her father's death, how he had leveraged her desperate financial situation to force her into an engagement, or how she had discovered his unsavory gambling habits and mistreatment of his previous wife just days before their wedding. As night fell, the storm showed no signs of abating. Isaac insisted Theodora take the cot while he made a pallet on the floor near the stove. I've slept under the stars in all seasons, he assured her when she protested. This is luxury by comparison. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Theodora. The unfamiliar sounds of the storm, the strange surroundings, and the presence of the man sleeping just feet away kept her mind active. She found herself studying Isaac's profile in the dim light of the banked fire, the strong line of his jaw, the way his dark lashes rested against his cheeks, the steady rise and fall of his chest. There was something about him that inspired trust, a quiet confidence and integrity that reminded her of her father. Yet there was nothing paternal in the way her pulse quickened when he smiled at her, or in the warmth that spread through her when their fingers had brushed as he handed her the coffee cup. Such thoughts were inappropriate. Theodora scolded herself. She had known this man less than a day. Besides, she had come west to establish herself independently, not to fall under another man's influence, no matter how honorable he might seem. Still, as she finally drifted towards sleep, Theodora found herself wondering what it might be like to truly belong in this wild, beautiful country, and if Isaac Walsh might somehow be part of that belonging. Morning brought clear skies and brilliant sunshine that streamed through the small windows of the lined shack. Theodora woke to find Isaac already outside, tending to Phoenix. She quickly straightened her borrowed clothes and attempted to bring some order to her long auburn hair, which had escaped its pins during the night. When Isaac returned, he carried a handful of wild berries. "Breakfast," he said with a grin, setting them on the table. "Not much, but they'll tide us over until we reach town." "Thank you," Theodora said, suddenly shy in the light of day, "for everything." Isaac's eyes met hers and something unspoken passed between them. "We should get moving," he said after a moment. "The creek might be high after the storm, and we'll need to find a safe crossing." Within the hour, they were back on the trail, Theodora once again seated before Isaac on Phoenix's broad back. The landscape had been transformed by the rain. Wildflowers dotted the plains with splashes of yellow and purple, and the air carried the sweet scent of damp earth and vegetation. "It's beautiful," Theodora breathed, taking in the panorama of mountains and valleys stretching to the horizon. "Most Easterners only see the harshness at first," Isaac observed. "Takes a special eye to appreciate the beauty here." "My father always said true beauty reveals itself to those who take the time to look beyond first impressions," Theodora replied. Isaac's arms tightened slightly around her. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," she said softly. "I miss him every day." They rode in comfortable silence for a time until Isaac pointed to a smudge on the horizon. "Copper Canyon will be there by midday." As they drew closer, Theodora could make out the outlines of buildings: a church steeple, a two-story structure that must be the hotel, and a scattering of smaller buildings lining what appeared to be the main street. A flutter of nervousness took root in her stomach. This would be her new home, these people her new community. Would they accept her? Would she find the fresh start she so desperately needed? Having second thoughts, Isaac asked, seeming to sense her tension. "No," Theodora said firmly, just anticipating the challenges ahead. "You won't face them alone," Isaac assured her. "As I mentioned, my sister Martha runs the boarding house. She'll look after you until you get settled." The mention of his sister prompted Theodora to ask, "Do you have other family in the area?" "No," Isaac replied, a note of sadness entering his voice. "Our parents died on the journey west when I was 16 and Martha 14. Cholera took them both within days of each other. We made it the rest of the way on our own." "I'm so sorry," Theodora said, understanding all too well the pain of losing parents. "It was a long time ago," Isaac said. "Martha and I made our way. She married Tom Abernathy 10 years back. Good man, runs the general store. They have 2 boys, Henry and Samuel. They'll be in your school." As they approached the outskirts of town, they encountered other travelers, a wagon loaded with supplies, a pair of cowboys driving a small herd of cattle, a male rider who exchanged greetings with Isaac. Each encounter drew curious glances at Theodora in her men's attire, seated before Isaac Walsh on his well-known stallion. "Word of your arrival will beat us into town," Isaac said with a chuckle. "Nothing travels faster than news in Copper Canyon." Sure enough, by the time they rode down the main street, people were emerging from shops and homes to get a look at the newcomer. Theodora felt her face flush under the scrutiny, acutely aware of her inappropriate clothing and disheveled appearance. Isaac guided Phoenix to a hitching post outside a 2-story clapboard building with a sign reading Abernathy's General Store. As he helped her dismount, a plump, pleasant-faced woman with Isaac's same blue eyes hurried out of the store. "Isaac. We were worried when you didn't return yesterday," she exclaimed, then her gaze fell on Theodora. "And who might this be?" "Martha, this is Miss Theodora Sullivan, Copper Canyon's new school teacher," Isaac said. "Miss Sullivan, my sister, Martha Abernathy." Martha's face lit up. "The school teacher. Oh, we've been hoping you'd arrive soon. Term should start in just 3 weeks, and the children have been running wild all summer." She looked Theodora up and down, taking in her borrowed clothes with good-humored curiosity. "Though I must say, you're not quite what we expected." "It's a long story," Isaac interjected. "Miss Sullivan had some trouble with the stagecoach. We got caught in the storm and had to shelter at the line shack overnight." "Well, you poor dear," Martha said, linking her arm through Theodora's. "You must be exhausted. Let's get you settled at the boarding house. A hot bath and proper clothes will set you right." Theodora looked back at Isaac, suddenly reluctant to part from him. "Thank you again, Mr. Walsh. I don't know how I would have managed without your assistance." Isaac tipped his hat, his eyes warm. "It was my pleasure, Miss Sullivan. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other." Martha led Theodora across the street to a large, welcoming house with a wide front porch. "Isaac has never brought a lady to town before," she remarked with a sly smile. "You must have made quite an impression." "It wasn't like that," Theodora protested. "He was simply being kind to a stranded traveler." "Of course," Martha agreed, but her knowing expression suggested she wasn't convinced. "Now, let's find you something suitable to wear." "Can't have the new school teacher meeting the town council in my brother's old clothes. Can we?" Over the next few hours, Theodora was bathed, dressed in a borrowed blue calico dress that was only slightly too large, and settled into a comfortable room on the boarding house's second floor. Martha explained that the schoolteacher traditionally lived in small quarters attached to the schoolhouse, but those were currently being repaired and expanded. "The town's growing," Martha explained as she helped Theodora unpack her meager belongings. "The council decided the teacher should have more than just a single room. They're adding a proper kitchen and sitting room." "That's very generous," Theodora said, carefully hanging her wedding dress in the wardrobe. Despite its ruined state, she couldn't bring herself to discard it. The fine silk and lace had cost her father dearly. Martha eyed the dress curiously, but didn't comment directly. "The chairman of the school board, Mr. Peterson, would like to meet you this evening if you're not too tired. Just an informal introduction, mind you. The formal interview will be tomorrow with the full council." "I'd be delighted to meet him," Theodora assured her, though butterflies danced in her stomach at the prospect. Everything was happening so quickly. "Wonderful, he'll join us for supper at 6. "My Tom and the boys are eager to meet you too." Martha paused at the door. "Rest now, dear, you've had quite a journey." Left alone, Theodora sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by the whirlwind of changes. Just 4 days ago, she had been in Philadelphia, facing a future as Edwin Hargrove's wife, a prospect that had grown increasingly horrifying as she discovered his true nature. Now she was in a frontier town, about to interview for a position as a schoolteacher, wearing a borrowed dress, without a friend in the world except, perhaps, the kind cowboy who had rescued her from the stagecoach station. Isaac Walsh. His face appeared in her mind, those striking blue eyes, the gentle way he'd steadied her when she'd dismounted from Phoenix, the protective circle of his arms during their ride. Theodora shook her head to clear such thoughts. She had fled one man's control only days ago. She had no business entertaining romantic notions about another, no matter how different they might seem. Still, as she drifted into a much-needed nap, it was Isaac's smile that followed her into her dreams. Supper at the Abernathy home was a lively affair. Tom Abernathy proved to be a jovial man with a booming laugh and endless stories about the town and its inhabitants. Their sons, Henry and Samuel, aged 10 and 8, peppered Theodora with questions about what they would learn in school and whether she knew how to play baseball. Mr. Peterson, the chairman of the school board, arrived precisely at 6. He was a distinguished man in his 50s, with silver-streaked hair and wire-rimmed spectacles that gave him a scholarly appearance. "Miss Sullivan," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "We're delighted you've arrived safely, though I understand your journey was more adventurous than anticipated." "Yes, quite," Theodora replied with a smile. "I'm grateful to Mr. Walsh for his assistance." "Isaac is one of our most respected citizens," Mr. Peterson said approvingly. "His word carries weight in this community. If he vouches for you, that's good enough for most folks." The conversation over dinner covered Theodora's educational background, her teaching philosophy, and the needs of Copper Canyon School. Mr. Peterson seemed impressed with her responses and indicated that the formal interview tomorrow would likely be a mere formality. "We've been without a teacher for months," he explained. "The children are falling behind, and with harvest season approaching, parents are eager to have them back in school before they're needed in the fields." As the meal concluded, Martha brought out an apple pie that filled the room with its cinnamon aroma. Just as they were about to serve it, a knock came at the door. Tom answered it, and Theodora's heart skipped when she heard Isaac's voice in the entryway. He entered the dining room, hat in hand, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. "Evening, folks," he greeted everyone, his eyes finding Theodora immediately. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Martha said, clearly pleased by her brother's appearance. "We're just about to have pie." "Join us." "I brought something for Miss Sullivan," Isaac said, producing a small bundle from behind his back. "Found these at the line shack when I went back for the things we left behind in our haste." He handed Theodora a neatly folded stack of her undergarments that had been drying after she'd washed them during their stay. Her face flamed at the thought of him handling such personal items, but Isaac's expression remained respectfully neutral. Thank you, she managed to say, quickly setting the bundle aside. Also, Isaac continued, I thought you might need this. He pulled a small leather-bound book from his pocket, her father's volume of Shakespeare's sonnets that must have fallen from her carpet bag during their journey. Theodora took it with genuine gratitude. Oh, I thought I'd lost it. It was my father's. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Theodora felt that same inexplicable warmth spreading through her. Martha insisted Isaac stay for pie, and he took the empty chair beside Theodora. Throughout the dessert and coffee that followed, Theodora was acutely aware of his presence, the clean scent of soap that clung to him, the way his forearm rested near hers on the table, the deep timbre of his voice as he discussed cattle prices with Tom and school matters with Mr. Peterson. When the evening drew to a close, Isaac offered to walk Theodora back to the boarding house, though it was just across the street. Have you had a chance to see much of the town? He asked as they stepped onto the porch. Not yet, Theodora admitted. Martha's been wonderful, but I've mostly been preparing for tomorrow's interview. You'll do fine, Isaac assured her. But if you'd like, I could show you around after your meeting with the council. You should know the place you'll be calling home. The offer was tempting, but Theodora hesitated. I wouldn't want to impose on your time. Surely you have ranch work to attend to. My foreman can manage for an afternoon, Isaac said with a smile. Besides, what use is building something if you never take time to enjoy it? The philosophy struck a chord with Theodora. How often had her father said similar things before his illness had confined him to bed? In that case, I accept, she said. Thank you. They had reached the boarding house steps, and an awkward moment ensued as they faced each other in the soft glow of the porch lantern. Well, good night, Miss Sullivan, Isaac finally said. I'll call for you around noon tomorrow if that suits. Perfectly, Theodora replied. And please, after all we've been through, I think you might call me Theodora when we're not in company. Isaac's smile deepened. Theodora, he said, as if testing the feel of her name on his tongue. Good night, then. He tipped his hat and turned to go, but not before Theodora caught the pleased expression on his face, an expression she suspected mirrored her own. As she prepared for bed that night, Theodora told herself that her anticipation for tomorrow had everything to do with the school board interview and nothing at all to do with the prospect of spending the afternoon with Isaac Walsh. But even as she thought it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. The school board interview the next morning went precisely as Mr. Peterson had predicted, a formality that concluded with Theodora being officially offered the position of schoolteacher for Copper Canyon. The salary was modest, but included the living quarters at the schoolhouse, which would be ready within a week, and meals at the hotel until then. We'll call a town meeting for Saturday evening to introduce you to the community, Mr. Peterson informed her as they shook hands to seal the agreement. School will commence the following Monday. Theodora left the town hall with a buoyant step, her mind already filling with plans for lessons and classroom arrangements. She was so preoccupied that she nearly collided with Isaac, who was waiting at the bottom of the steps. From your expression, I'd say congratulations are in order, he said, steadying her with a hand at her elbow. Yes, Theodora confirmed happily. I'm officially Copper Canyon's new school teacher. The town just got a whole lot smarter, Isaac said with a grin. Ready for that tour. He had brought a buggy rather than his horse, and Theodora was grateful for the more conventional transportation. The borrowed dress from Martha was much more suitable for sitting properly in a carriage than astride a horse. Isaac proved to be an excellent guide, pointing out the town's landmarks as they drove slowly down the main street. Copper Canyon was larger than it had appeared on her arrival, with several side streets branching off the central thoroughfare. There was a small church, the sheriff's office and jail, a bank, the hotel, several saloons, a dressmaker's shop, a barber shop, a doctor's office, and various other businesses serving the community's needs. And here's your domain, Isaac said as they pulled up before a white clapboard building set slightly apart from the others. The Copper Canyon School. The schoolhouse was simple but well-maintained, with large windows to let in light and a bell tower atop the roof. Workers were busy on an addition at the back, which Theodora assumed would be her living quarters. Would you like to see inside? Isaac asked. Very much, Theodora replied eagerly. Isaac helped her down from the buggy and they approached the building. He produced a key from his pocket. Mr. Peterson asked me to give you this. As a member of the town council, I keep a spare. Theodora's surprise must have shown on her face, for Isaac added, I serve as the council's treasurer. My sister didn't mention that? No, she didn't, Theodora said, intrigued by this new facet of the rancher. Inside, the schoolhouse consisted of one large room with rows of desks facing a teacher's platform at the front. A blackboard covered most of one wall, and a pot-bellied stove stood in the corner for winter heating. Bookshelves lined the back wall, though they held disappointingly few volumes. The library's a bit sparse, Isaac acknowledged, following her gaze. Miss Jenkins wasn't much of a reader and funds have been tight. But with the cattle and mining operations doing well this year, we might be able to allocate more for books. Theodora ran her fingers along the empty shelves, already imagining them filled with literature, history texts, and science primers. Books open worlds for children who might never travel beyond this territory, she said softly. Isaac watched her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. You're going to change things here, Theodora Sullivan, he said. I can feel it. After exploring the schoolhouse, they continued their tour beyond the town limits. Isaac showed her the creek where children swam in summer, the meadow where town picnics were held, and finally, as the afternoon waned, they crested a hill that offered a panoramic view of the valley. It's breathtaking, Theodora said, taking in the sweeping vista. This is my favorite spot, Isaac admitted. I come here to think when decisions weigh heavy. They sat in companionable silence for a time, the only sounds the gentle breeze rustling through the grass and the distant lowing of cattle. May I ask you something personal? Isaac finally said. Theodora tensed slightly but nodded. That wedding dress, he began carefully. You were running from someone, weren't you? The direct question caught her off guard. For a moment, Theodora considered deflecting or offering a partial truth. But something about Isaac's straightforward nature made her want to be equally honest. Yes, she admitted. My father's colleague, Edwin Hargrove. After my father died, he was appointed my guardian, though I'm of age. He controlled my father's pension and our home. He made it clear that marriage to him was my only option if I wished to avoid destitution. Isaac's expression darkened. He forced you, not physically, Theodora clarified. But he left me no viable alternatives, or so I believed until I discovered his gambling debts and the rumors about his first wife's accident. 3 days before the wedding, I took what money I could gather and fled. Wearing your wedding dress? Isaac asked, puzzled. Theodora's laugh held little humor. I had just returned from the final fitting. It was the most expensive thing I owned, and I couldn't bear to leave it behind. Foolish, I know. Not foolish, Isaac said quietly. Brave. It takes courage to leave everything familiar behind and start anew. Or desperation, Theodora countered. Sometimes they're the same thing. Isaac's gaze was steady. Do you regret it? Coming west, Theodora considered the question seriously. Despite the challenges and uncertainties ahead, she felt more herself than she had in months. No, she said with conviction. I don't regret it at all. Something shifted between them in that moment, a deepening of the connection that had been growing since their first meeting. Isaac's eyes held hers, and Theodora found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by an invisible force she couldn't name. The spell was broken by the distant ringing of the town church bell, signaling the hour. We should head back, Isaac said, though he seemed reluctant. Martha will have supper waiting, and she's not one to appreciate tardiness. As they drove back toward town, Theodora reflected on how comfortable she felt in Isaac's company. There was none of the stiff formality she'd experienced with Edwin, nor the sense that she needed to guard her words or manage his moods. Isaac listened when she spoke, offered his thoughts without expecting deference, and seemed genuinely interested in her opinions. It was a novel experience being treated as an equal, and Theodora found she liked it very much indeed. The days that followed established a pattern that quickly became the new rhythm of Theodora's life. Mornings were devoted to preparing the schoolhouse and developing lesson plans. Afternoons often included a visit from Isaac, who always had some reason to be in town, supplies to purchase, council business to attend to, a fence that needed mending at the church. Each visit ended with them talking longer than was strictly necessary, sharing stories of their pasts and thoughts about the future. Theodora learned about Isaac's struggles to establish his ranch, his passion for breeding horses with both speed and stamina, and his hopes to someday build a proper house to replace the cabin he currently called home. In turn, she told him about growing up surrounded by her father's books and students, her love of teaching, and her dreams of someday writing educational texts that made learning accessible to all children, regardless of background. The townsfolk noticed their growing friendship, of course. Martha made no secret of her approval, often finding reasons to invite her brother to meals when Theodora would be present. Other community members seemed equally encouraging, with many offering knowing smiles when Isaac and Theodora were seen together. "They think we're courting," Theodora observed one afternoon as they walked from the general store, where Isaac had helped her select supplies for the school. "And that bothers you?" Isaac asked, his tone carefully neutral. Theodora considered the question. "It's not that," she said slowly. I came here to establish myself independently, to prove I could make my own way." "Being independent doesn't mean being alone," Isaac pointed out. "Even the most self-sufficient rancher relies on neighbors during roundup and branding." The wisdom in his words struck her. Wasn't that what her father had always taught, that true strength came not from isolation, but from knowing when to stand alone and when to accept help? Before she could respond, a commotion down the street caught their attention. A group of men on horseback had ridden into town, their manner boisterous and aggressive. From the reactions of people on the boardwalk, this was an unwelcome arrival. "Trouble," Isaac muttered, his expression hardening. "The Clayton gang. They come through a few times a year, drink too much, start fights, and generally make nuisances of themselves." As if to prove his point, one of the riders dismounted in front of the saloon and deliberately shouldered past an elderly man, knocking him to the ground. "Stay here," Isaac instructed, striding toward the confrontation. But Theodora followed, concerned for both Isaac and the fallen man. By the time they reached the scene, a small crowd had gathered. Isaac helped the elderly man to his feet while fixing the newcomer with a steely gaze. "That was uncalled for, Clayton," he said, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable edge. The man, Clayton, presumably was tall and robined, with a face weathered by sun and hard living. He sneered at Isaac. "Walsh, still playing town councilman. Thought you'd have figured out by now that genteel living doesn't suit you. And I thought you'd have figured out you're not welcome in Copper Canyon," Isaac replied evenly. "Yet here you are." Clayton's gaze shifted to Theodora, and his expression changed to one of leering interest. "And who's this pretty thing? New in town, are you, darlin'?" Isaac stepped slightly in front of Theodora. "Miss Sullivan is our new schoolteacher. She's none of your concern." "A schoolteacher," Clayton laughed. "Seems Copper Canyon's moving up in the world. Maybe I should further my education." The suggestive tone made Theodora's skin crawl, but she refused to be intimidated. "Education requires discipline and respect," she said coolly. "Qualities you seem to lack, Mr. Clayton." Several onlookers drew in sharp breaths at her boldness, but Isaac's mouth twitched with suppressed amusement. Clayton's face darkened. "Got a sharp tongue on her, don't she, Walsh? You should teach your woman better manners." "Miss Sullivan speaks for herself," Isaac replied, "and she's right. Now, why don't you and your men have your drinks and move on? We don't want trouble." "Maybe trouble wants you," Clayton retorted, but his bluster seemed to diminish as the sheriff appeared at the edge of the crowd. "Everything all right here?" Sheriff Tanner asked, his hand resting casually near his holstered pistol. Clayton glanced around, assessing the situation. Apparently deciding it wasn't worth escalating, he shrugged. "Just greeting old friends, Sheriff. No law against that, is there?" "No law against it," the sheriff agreed mildly, "long as the greeting stays peaceful." With a final glare at Isaac, Clayton turned and entered the saloon, his men following. As the crowd dispersed, Sheriff Tanner approached Isaac and Theodora. "Miss Sullivan, not the best introduction to some of our less desirable visitors. Don't worry, though." They generally blow through town like a summer storm, lots of noise, little lasting damage. Thank you, Sheriff, Theodora replied. I'm not easily frightened. So I noticed, the sheriff said with approval. Got yourself a spirited one here, Isaac. Before either could correct his assumption, the sheriff tipped his hat and moved on to ensure the Clayton gang caused no further disturbances. I apologize for that, Isaac said as they resumed their walk, now heading toward the boarding house. Clayton and I have a history. He tried to run me off my land when I first staked my claim. When that didn't work, he's made it his mission to cause trouble whenever our paths cross. You handled it well, Theodora observed. Many men would have resorted to violence. Violence rarely solves anything permanently, Isaac said. My father taught me that before he died. He glanced at her with a rueful smile. Though I admit, when he looked at you that way, I was sorely tempted to forget that lesson. The protectiveness in his tone sent a warm flutter through Theodora's chest. I can handle men like Clayton, she assured him. I dealt with plenty of arrogant professors who thought women had no place in academic discussions. I don't doubt your ability to handle yourself, Isaac said. It's just… He trailed off, seeming to search for words. Just what? Theodora prompted. Isaac stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. I care about you, Theodora, more than I expected to, and certainly more quickly than I should admit. The directness of his declaration took her breath away. This was no flowery courtship speech like Edwin's had been, but a simple statement of fact all the more powerful for its honesty. I care about you too, she admitted, the words coming easier than she'd anticipated. But Isaac, I'm not sure I'm ready for whatever this is becoming. I need to establish myself here to know I can stand on my own. I understand, Isaac said, and she believed he truly did. I'm not asking for promises, Theodora, just possibility. The word hung between them, full of potential and hope. I can offer that, Theodora said softly. Possibility. Isaac's smile returned, warming his eyes. Then that's enough for now. He walked her the rest of the way to the boarding house in companionable silence, both aware that something significant had shifted between them, a mutual acknowledgement of feelings that could no longer be ignored, even if their future remained uncertain. The next day brought the town meeting, where Theodora was formally introduced to the community. Standing before the gathered residents in the church, which served as the town's meeting hall, she felt a momentary flutter of nerves. But when she spotted Isaac sitting with Martha and her family, his encouraging smile steadied her. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Peterson began, it is my great pleasure to introduce Miss Theodora Sullivan, who comes to us from Philadelphia with impressive credentials and a passion for education. The school board has unanimously selected her as our new teacher, and we look forward to the commencement of classes this coming Monday. The crowd applauded politely, curious eyes studying Theodora as she stepped forward. Thank you for your warm welcome, she began, her voice growing stronger as she continued. I'm honored to join your community and to take on the responsibility of educating your children. I believe that knowledge is the greatest gift we can offer the next generation, equipping them not just for success, but for a life of meaning and purpose. As she outlined her teaching philosophy and plans for the school year, Theodora saw heads nodding in approval. By the time she concluded her brief speech, the initial polite reception had warmed to genuine enthusiasm. We're fortunate to have you, Miss Sullivan, Mr. Peterson said as the meeting transitioned to other town business. The remainder of the evening brought a steady stream of introductions as parents approached to meet their children's new teacher. Theodora did her best to remember names and faces, making mental notes about each child's interests and aptitudes as described by their proud mothers and fathers. Through it all, she was aware of Isaac's presence, sometimes nearby, sometimes across the room, but always watching over her with that same steady support she'd come to rely on in the short time she'd known him. When the meeting concluded, Isaac made his way to her side. You impressed them, he said with undisguised pride. Even old Mr. Granger, and he hasn't approved of anything since the war ended. I hope I can live up to their expectations, Theodora replied, suddenly feeling the weight of responsibility. You'll exceed them, Isaac assured her. But not if you're exhausted on your first day. Let me take you home. Home. The word brought a pang of both nostalgia and hope. The schoolhouse wasn't ready, yet the additions still required a few more days of work. But Martha had informed her that morning that her things had been moved to the temporary teachers' quarters at the back of the church, where she would stay until her permanent residence was completed. Isaac escorted her there, carrying the stack of introductory primers she'd acquired for her younger students. The quarters were modest: a small bedroom, a sitting area with a desk, and access to the church kitchen, but Theodora found them perfectly adequate. "It's not much," Isaac said as he set the books on the desk. "It's more than enough," Theodora assured him. "In Philadelphia, I shared a small bedroom with 2 other faculty daughters. This feels positively spacious by comparison." Isaac's expression softened. "You're remarkable, Theodora Sullivan. Most women coming from your background would find all this beneath them." "Perhaps I never truly belonged in that world," she mused. "My father was respected for his intellect, but we were never truly accepted in Philadelphia society. Too unconventional in our thinking." "Their loss," Isaac said simply. He hesitated, then added, "I'd like to call on you properly once you're settled, with your permission." The formal request, so at odds with the easy companionship they'd established, brought a smile to Theodora's lips. "Are you asking to court me, Mr. Walsh?" "I believe I am, Miss Sullivan," he replied, a matching smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Assuming you're amenable." "I find I am," Theodora said, surprising herself with the certainty she felt, "though I still have conditions." "Name them." "My work comes first," she stated firmly. "The children deserve my full attention and best efforts." Isaac nodded. "Agreed. What else?" "I wish to maintain my independence," Theodora continued. "I value your opinion, but I must make my own decisions." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Isaac assured her. "Your spirit is part of what draws me to you." His candor sent a flush of warmth to her cheeks. "Then yes, you may call on me, though I warn you, my free time will be limited once school begins." "I'm a patient man," Isaac said with a grin. "Had to be building a ranch from nothing." His expression grew more serious. "One more thing, Theodora. About Clayton and his men, I'm not concerned about them," she interrupted. "You should be," Isaac insisted. "They usually pass through quickly, but something about their manner today troubled me. Just be alert until they've left the area." Theodora wanted to dismiss his warning as overprotectiveness, but the genuine concern in his eyes gave her pause. "I'll be careful," she promised. Satisfied with her assurance, Isaac bid her good night with a respectful bow that somehow managed to convey both formality and affection. As she watched him walk away, Theodora reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. A month ago, she had been preparing to marry a man she increasingly feared. Now she was embarking on a career she loved in a place that already felt more like home than Philadelphia ever had, with the prospect of a courtship that excited rather than alarmed her. If this was what came of fleeing in a wedding dress, perhaps impulsive decisions weren't always unwise after all. The first day of school dawned bright and clear, a perfect September morning that seemed to promise new beginnings. Theodora arrived early, arranging her desk and writing a welcome message on the blackboard. She had spent the previous day organizing the students into appropriate groups based on age and prior education, as gleaned from the records left by her predecessor. By 8 o'clock, children began arriving, some eager, some reluctant, all curious about their new teacher. Theodora greeted each one by name, having studied the school roster until she could match every child to their family. When the bell rang to signal the start of classes, 22 students ranging in age from 6 to 16 filled the schoolhouse benches. Theodora surveyed them with a mix of excitement and determination. "Good morning," she began. "I am Miss Sullivan, and I am honored to be your teacher. In this room, we will embark on a journey together, a journey of discovery, of questions and answers, of challenges and triumphs." She moved among the desks as she spoke, establishing her presence and connecting with each child through eye contact and small gestures, a gentle touch on a shoulder here, a reassuring smile there. "I believe every one of you has gifts to develop and dreams to pursue," she continued. My job is to help you build the knowledge and skills you'll need to achieve those dreams, whether they lead you to distant cities or keep you right here in Copper Canyon." By the end of her introduction, even the most skeptical students were watching her with interest. Theodora felt a surge of satisfaction. This connection, this opportunity to shape young minds was what she had been born to do. The day passed in a blur of assessments, introductions, and establishing routines. Theodora quickly identified her strongest students and those who would need extra support. She was impressed by the general level of knowledge among the older children, though there were significant gaps in their education that would need addressing. When the final bell rang, Theodora was surprised to find Isaac waiting outside, leaning against a hitching post with casual grace. "Thought you might appreciate a ride to your new home," he said as the children dispersed. "The workers finished the additions this morning." "That's wonderful news," Theodora said, gathering her materials. "I was beginning to wear out my welcome at the church quarters, I fear. Reverend Williams is too polite to say so, but I know he's eager to reclaim the space for visiting preachers." Isaac helped her load her books and papers into his buggy, then drove her to the schoolhouse. The new addition at the back was painted to match the main building, with its own separate entrance and a small porch. "It's perfect," Theodora exclaimed as Isaac showed her through the rooms a cozy bedroom, a functional kitchen, and a sitting room with built-in bookshelves that were considerably more extensive than she had expected. "The shelves were my addition to the plans," Isaac admitted. "I thought you might appreciate the space for your books once they arrive from Philadelphia." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Theodora deeply. "Thank you," she said softly. "That was very perceptive of you." "I pay attention," Isaac said simply. As they stood in the center of what would be her home, Theodora was struck by the rightness of it all, the school connected to her living space, the community that had welcomed her, and this man who seemed to understand her needs sometimes before she recognized them herself. "How was your first day?" Isaac asked as he helped her unpack the crate of personal belongings that had been delivered from the boarding house. Theodora described the students, their varied abilities, and her plans for addressing the educational disparities among them. Isaac listened attentively, asking insightful questions that revealed his own commitment to the town's children. "You care deeply about the school," Theodora observed. "Is that why you serve on the council?" "Partly," Isaac acknowledged. "Education was important to my parents. They sacrificed to ensure Martha and I could read and cipher, even on the journey west. After they died, books became a connection to them and a way forward for us." The personal revelation, offered so matter-of-factly, added another dimension to Theodora's understanding of him. She had assumed his interest in education stemmed from civic duty. Now she recognized it was rooted in something much more profound. "Will you stay for supper?" she asked impulsively. "It won't be elaborate, just whatever provisions Martha packed for me, but I'd welcome the company." Isaac's smile warmed his eyes. "I'd like that very much." That first meal in her new home established a pattern that would repeat in the weeks that followed. 2 or 3 evenings each week, Isaac would arrive at the schoolhouse after classes ended, sometimes bearing fresh vegetables from his garden or meat from a recent hunt. They would prepare the meal together, talking about their days, the town's happenings, or deeper subjects that ranged from politics to philosophy to personal dreams. On Sundays, Isaac would escort Theodora to church, then to dinner at Martha and Tom's home, where they were treated as a confirmed couple despite the early stage of their courtship. The townsfolk similarly accepted their relationship as established, greeting them as a pair at community events, and directing questions about one to the other when appropriate. For Theodora, who had guarded her independence so fiercely, the ease with which she and Isaac fell into partnership was both surprising and natural. He never attempted to direct her actions or decisions regarding the school, and she found herself genuinely interested in his tales of ranch life and the challenges he faced. Their courtship progressed with a comfortable pace that suited them both. Isaac was respectful of propriety, limiting physical contact to the occasional hand holding or a steadying arm. Yet Theodora found these simple touches more affecting than any of Edwin's practiced gallantries had ever been. October brought harvest celebrations, with the town gathering for a festival that included competitions, music, dancing, and tables laden with the community's bounty. Theodora's students performed recitations they had practiced for weeks, earning appreciative applause from parents and neighbors alike. As twilight fell and lanterns were lit for the dancing, Isaac approached Theodora with an unusually formal bow. "May I have this dance, Miss Sullivan?" "You may, Mr. Walsh," she replied with matching formality, though her eyes sparkled with pleasure. The musicians struck up a waltz, and Isaac led her onto the makeshift dance floor with unexpected grace for a man who spent most of his days on horseback. "You dance well," Theodora observed as they moved in perfect rhythm. "Martha insisted I learn," Isaac explained, said no sister of hers would have a brother who couldn't properly escort a lady at social functions. "I must remember to thank her," Theodora said with a smile. As they circled among the other dancers, Theodora caught sight of Martha watching them with undisguised satisfaction. Other townsfolk, too, seemed pleased by the tableau they presented the schoolteacher and the rancher, so obviously well-matched despite their different backgrounds. When the music ended, Isaac kept hold of her hand. "Would you walk with me?" he asked, gesturing toward the edge of town where the festivities faded into the quiet of the autumn evening. Theodora nodded, curious about his suddenly serious demeanor. They strolled in companionable silence until they reached a stand of cottonwoods at the edge of the creek, their leaves golden in the light of the rising moon. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Isaac said, turning to face her, "but I wanted to be sure of your answer before I did." Theodora's heart quickened. "And are you sure of my answer?" "No," Isaac admitted with a small laugh, "but I'm sure of my question, and that will have to be enough." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that caught the moonlight, a ring with a modest diamond that nevertheless sparkled brilliantly. "Theodora Sullivan," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "I've known you only a short time by some measures, but long enough by others. You've brought joy and purpose into my life that I didn't know was missing. I love your intelligence, your courage, your dedication to your students, and the way you've embraced this community that means so much to me." He took her hand, his touch warm and sure. "I'm not asking you to give up anything, not your independence, not your career, not your dreams. I'm asking if you'll let me support those dreams, stand beside you through whatever challenges come, and build a life together that honors who we both are." Theodora felt tears gathering in her eyes, not from sorrow, but from a surging joy she hadn't thought possible months ago. "Will you marry me, Theodora?" Isaac asked simply. "Not because you need me, but because we're better together than apart." The question, phrased as it was, addressed her deepest concern about marriage, that it would mean surrendering the independence she had fought to establish. Yet Isaac wasn't asking her to diminish herself, he was proposing a partnership of equals. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, Isaac, I will marry you." His smile was brilliant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had always been meant for her hand. "It was my mother's," Isaac explained softly. "One of the few things Martha and I managed to keep after they died. She would have loved you, Theodora. Both my parents would have." "I wish I could have known them," Theodora said, touching the ring with reverent fingers. "As I wish you could have known my father. We'll honor them in the life we build together," Isaac promised. He hesitated, then asked, "How long an engagement would you prefer?" "I know Eastern customs often call for a year or more, but out here, not long," Theodora interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. "I don't need to wait to know this is right." Isaac's eyes darkened with emotion. "Christmas, then, would that give you enough time to prepare?" "Christmas would be perfect," Theodora agreed. He drew her closer then, one hand cupping her cheek with exquisite tenderness. "May I kiss you, Theodora Sullivan? I've been wanting to since the moment I saw you in that dust-covered wedding dress." "I've been hoping you would," she admitted softly. Their first kiss was gentle, a question and answer exchanged without words. The second was deeper, a promise of the life they would share. When they finally parted, both were breathless and smiling. "We should return to the festival," Theodora said reluctantly. People will wonder where we've gone." "Let them wonder," Isaac replied with a grin. "Though I suppose we should go back and announce our news. Martha will never forgive me if she hears it from someone else." Hand in hand, they walked back toward the lights and music of the harvest celebration, both aware that they had just taken the first step on a journey that would bind their lives together in ways neither could fully anticipate, but both eagerly embraced. The news of their engagement spread through Copper Canyon with the speed that only small-town gossip can achieve. By the following morning, Theodora was receiving congratulations from parents as they dropped off their children, and her students peppered her with questions about whether she would still be their teacher after she became Mrs. Walsh. "Nothing will change regarding your education," she assured them firmly, "though you may need to adjust to calling me by a new name." In the weeks that followed, preparations for both the wedding and Christmas celebrations occupied much of the community's attention. Martha appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator, helping Theodora plan a ceremony that would honor both Eastern traditions and Western practicalities. "You'll need a new dress, of course," Martha declared during one of their planning sessions. "Something befitting a bride but suitable for a frontier wedding." Theodora thought of the ruined wedding gown still hanging in her wardrobe. "Actually," she said hesitantly, "I already have a wedding dress. It needs considerable work, but the material is fine and it has significance." Martha's eyebrows rose. "The one you were wearing when Isaac found you. Can I see it?" Theodora retrieved the gown, carefully laying it out on her bed. The once pristine white silk was stained with the red dust of the territory, torn in places from her hurried escape and the difficult journey west. "My father saved for years to buy this material," Theodora explained, running her fingers over the delicate lace trim. "It was his gift to me, though he didn't live to see me wear it." Martha examined the dress with a practiced eye. "The foundation is sound," she determined. "We can remove the worst stained sections, replace them with new fabric, perhaps add trim to disguise the seams." She looked up at Theodora with understanding. "It would be a way to honor your father while embracing your new life." "Exactly," Theodora said, relieved that Martha understood. "We'll need help," Martha decided. "I'll speak with Mrs. Hernandez. She was a seamstress in San Francisco before she married the blacksmith. Between us, we'll make this dress sing again." The restoration of the wedding gown became a project that united several of the town's women. Mrs. Hernandez brought her considerable skills to bear, while Mrs. Peterson contributed lace from her own wedding dress for areas that needed replacement. Even Theodora's older female students helped with some of the simpler stitching during lunch breaks, proud to be included in their teachers' special preparations. Meanwhile, Isaac was busy with his own projects. He had decided that they would live at the ranch after the wedding, which meant the schoolteachers' quarters would need a new occupant. "The council has approved hiring an assistant for you," he informed Theodora one evening as they discussed arrangements. "Someone to help with the younger children and eventually take over the school if you decide to start a family." The consideration behind his planning touched Theodora deeply. He hadn't assumed she would abandon her calling after marriage, nor had he presumed that children would immediately follow their wedding. Instead, he was creating options that would allow her to balance her various roles according to her own choices. "Thank you," she said simply, squeezing his hand, "for understanding what the school means to me." "It's part of who you are," Isaac replied. "I'd never ask you to give that up." As December arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional dustings of snow to the high desert, Isaac surprised Theodora by taking her to his ranch for the first time. They rode out on a Saturday morning, Phoenix carrying Isaac, while Theodora rode a gentle mare named Daisy that Isaac had been training specifically for her. "You're becoming quite the horsewoman," Isaac observed with pride as Theodora handled her mount with growing confidence. "I have an excellent teacher," she replied with a smile. The Walsh Ranch lay in a sheltered valley about 5 miles from town, with a creek running through property that alternated between grassy meadows and stands of pine and oak. Cattle grazed on the hillsides, while closer to the main buildings, several paddocks held horses of varying ages and breeds. "It's beautiful," Theodora breathed as they crested the final rise and the ranch spread out before them. "It's home," Isaac said simply, but the pride in his voice was unmistakable. He showed her around the property, the barn where he bred and trained his horses, the corrals where new calves were born each spring, the orchards he'd planted that were just beginning to produce fruit. Throughout the tour, Theodora was struck by the careful planning evident in every aspect of the ranch. Nothing was haphazard. Each element served a purpose within the larger vision Isaac had for the land. "You've built something remarkable here," she told him as they approached the main house, a modest cabin that nonetheless appeared sturdy and well-maintained. "It's still a work in progress," Isaac said. "Always will be, I expect." Inside, the cabin was simpler than Theodora had anticipated, a main room that served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and two small bedrooms off to the side. The furnishings were functional rather than decorative, though everything was clean and well-ordered. "It's not what you're used to," Isaac said, watching her reaction carefully. "I know it's basic compared to your father's home in Philadelphia." "It's perfect," Theodora assured him, and meant it. The cabin had a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire blazing in the hearth, a sense of being genuinely lived in and loved. "I thought," Isaac began, then seemed to gather his courage before continuing. "I thought we might expand it after the wedding. Add a proper sitting room where you could have your books, maybe a larger kitchen. Eventually, more bedrooms when we need them." The thought of building their home together, of watching it grow along with their family, filled Theodora with a deep contentment. "I'd like that very much," she said softly. Isaac's expression relaxed into a smile. "I was worried you might find it too rustic." "Isaac," Theodora said, taking his hands in hers, "I didn't fall in love with your house. I fell in love with you. The rest is just details we'll figure out together." His kiss was tender, a silent acknowledgement of the truth in her words. When they parted, he led her to the far side of the main room, where a wooden chest stood against the wall. "I have something for you," he said, opening the lid to reveal a stack of books. "I've been collecting these since we became engaged. Thought they might start filling those shelves we talked about." Theodora knelt beside the chest, running her fingers reverently over the spine's works of literature, history, science, and education that would form the nucleus of their family library. "Isaac, this means more to me than I can express." "Books were your connection to your father," he said quietly. "I want them to be part of our home too." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to Theodora's eyes. Edwin had never understood her love of reading, considering it a distraction from what he deemed more appropriate feminine pursuits. Yet here was Isaac, not only accepting this essential part of her, but actively nurturing it. As they rode back to town later that afternoon, Theodora felt a deepening certainty about the life she had chosen. The path that had led her west in a dust-stained wedding dress had been fraught with fear and uncertainty, but it had brought her to this place, this man, this future that promised both purpose and love. 2 weeks before Christmas, with wedding preparations well underway, an unexpected letter arrived for Theodora. The postmark was Philadelphia, and she recognized Edwin's handwriting with a jolt of dismay. She opened it with trembling fingers, Isaac watching with concern from across her small sitting room where they had been reviewing the final details for their ceremony. "What is it?" he asked as her face paled. "Edwin," she said, scanning the closely written pages. "He's discovered where I am. Someone from Philadelphia who passed through Copper Canyon recognized my name in the town newspaper. There was an article about the school." Isaac rose and moved to her side. "What does he want?" "He claims I stole from him when I left," Theodora said, her voice tight with anger. "Family heirlooms that supposedly belonged to him, not my father. He threatens legal action if I don't return them or provide compensation." "Did you take anything that wasn't rightfully yours?" Isaac asked, his tone making it clear he already knew the answer. "Of course not," Theodora replied indignantly. "The few pieces of jewelry I brought were my mother's, given to me on my 16th birthday. The books were my father's personal collection, not university property. Everything else was purchased with my own earnings from tutoring." Isaac took the letter from her hands and read it carefully. This is harassment, nothing more, he determined. He has no legal claim and he knows it. He's hoping to frighten you into compliance or into returning east to face him. I won't go back, Theodora stated firmly. I won't give him that satisfaction. No one's asking you to, Isaac assured her. He studied the letter again. There's something else here between the lines. He mentions hearing of your rustic engagement and expresses concern for your well-being in such primitive conditions. He's trying to make me doubt my decisions, Theodora said, recognizing the manipulative tactics Edwin had often employed during their brief engagement. To make me question whether I belong here. Do you? Isaac asked, his expression serious. Question it, I mean. Theodora met his gaze steadily. Not for a moment. The conviction in her voice brought a smile to Isaac's face. Then we'll handle this together. I'll have the town lawyer review the letter, but I'm confident Edwin Hargrove has no legal standing here in Arizona territory. True to his word, Isaac arranged a meeting with Judge Wilson, who also served as Copper Canyon's legal counsel. The judge confirmed Isaac's assessment. Edwin had no claim on Theodora's possessions, and any attempt to pursue legal action across such distances would be costly and almost certainly futile. I'd suggest a formal response, the judge advised, stating clearly that his claims are without merit and that any further harassment will be met with legal countermeasures. That should put an end to it. Theodora drafted the letter that same day, her pen moving with confident strokes as she firmly closed this final chapter of her past. Isaac posted it for her on his next trip to town, and with that act, she felt the last lingering shadow of Edwin Hargrove dissipate from her life. As Christmas approached, excitement built throughout Copper Canyon. The town was transformed with evergreen boughs, red ribbons, and paper stars crafted by Theodora's students. The wedding, scheduled for Christmas Eve, had become a community celebration, with nearly everyone contributing in some way from food for the reception to decorations for the church. The morning of December 24th dawned clear and cold, with a dusting of fresh snow that made the landscape glitter in the winter sunshine. Theodora woke early in her quarters behind the schoolhouse, where Martha and several other women soon arrived to help her prepare. The dress is ready, Martha announced, carefully removing the restored wedding gown from its wrappings. Theodora gasped at the transformation. What had once been a ruined Eastern society gown had become something uniquely suited to its wearer and her new home. The worst stained sections had been removed, replaced with panels of ivory satin that complemented the original silk. The high collar had been redesigned to a more flattering neckline, while the sleeves had been shortened and simplified for greater practicality. Lace from Mrs. Peterson's gown formed a delicate overlay on the bodice, and embroidery in thread that matched the red earth of the territory edged the hem a deliberate echo of the dust that had once stained it. It's perfect, Theodora breathed, running her fingers over the careful stitching. Absolutely perfect. It tells your story, Mrs. Hernandez said softly. Where you came from, where you are now, and where you're going all in one dress. As the women helped her don the gown, arranged her hair, and added the finishing touches, Theodora felt a sense of rightness that had been entirely absent on her previous wedding day. There was no anxiety, no dread, only a peaceful anticipation of the life awaiting her. At precisely noon, Martha's eldest son, Henry, arrived to escort Theodora to the church. Uncle Isaac sent me to tell you he's waiting, the boy reported importantly, and that you don't have to worry about being exactly on time because he'd wait forever if he had to. Theodora smiled at the message, so characteristic of her soon-to-be husband. Tell him I have no intention of making him wait at all, she replied, gathering her bouquet of winter greenery and dried wildflowers. The short walk to the church seemed to exist outside of normal time, a suspended moment between her old life and the new one about to begin. The entire town had turned out for the occasion, lining the path to offer good wishes as she passed. At the church steps, Theodora paused, taking a deep breath before entering. The building was transformed with candles and evergreens, the simple space made festive for both Christmas and the wedding. At the altar stood Isaac, tall and handsome in a new black suit, his expression a mixture of awe and adoration as he watched her approach. Beside him stood Sheriff Tanner as best man, while Martha waited at the front to serve as matron of honor. The pews were filled with townsfolk who had, in the span of a few short months, become Theodora's community, her students and their families, shopkeepers and ranchers, all gathered to witness this union. Reverend Williams smiled broadly as Theodora reached the altar. "Who gives this woman in marriage?" he asked, following tradition despite the absence of Theodora's family. To her surprise, Mr. Peterson stood. "On behalf of the community of Copper Canyon who have embraced her as our own, I do," he said with dignity. The gesture brought tears to Theodora's eyes, a reminder that family could be found, not just born into. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful, with vows that Theodora and Isaac had written together, promising partnership, respect, and unwavering support through whatever challenges life might bring. When Isaac slipped the simple gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Williams declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Isaac's kiss was gentle yet promising, a perfect balance of restraint and passion appropriate to the setting but hinting at the deeper connection they shared. As they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Walsh, the church erupted in applause and cheers. Theodora felt Isaac's hand tighten around hers, an anchor in the swirl of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. "You look beautiful," he whispered as they walked back down the aisle. "That dress, it's like seeing your whole journey in fabric and thread." "That was the intention," Theodora replied with a smile, "from who I was to who I've become with you." The reception that followed in the town hall was a joyous blend of Christmas celebration and wedding feast. Tables groaned under the weight of roast turkey, ham, pies, and cakes contributed by families throughout the community. Music from fiddles and guitars filled the air as people danced, ate, and shared stories late into the afternoon. As dusk fell, Isaac found Theodora where she was speaking with a group of her students. "It's time," he said quietly, "if we want to reach the ranch before full dark." They made their farewells amid good-natured teasing and well wishes, then stepped outside to find a surprise waiting: a new buggy decorated with ribbons and bells, hitched to a matched pair of bay horses. "Wedding gift from the town," Sheriff Tanner explained with a grin. "Figured the schoolteacher and the rancher ought to have proper transportation between them." Overcome, Theodora could only embrace the sheriff in gratitude while Isaac shook hands with the men who had contributed to the generous gift. As they drove away from town, the sound of celebration still audible behind them, Theodora leaned against Isaac's shoulder in contented silence. The winter landscape spread around them, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, peaceful and full of promise. "Happy, Mrs. Walsh?" Isaac asked, his arm tightening around her. "Completely," Theodora replied, tilting her face up for his kiss. "And you, more than I ever thought possible," he admitted. "When I found you at that stagecoach station in your dust-covered wedding dress, I had no idea my life was about to change forever." "Nor I," Theodora said softly. "Though I think perhaps some part of me recognized, even then, that I had found not just shelter from a storm, but the place where I truly belonged." As they continued toward the ranch, toward home, Theodora reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought her to this moment. The wedding dress that had once symbolized her entrapment had been transformed, just as she had been, by the red dust of Arizona territory and the love of a man who saw her not as an ornament or possession, but as an equal partner in the adventure of building a life. She hadn't known, when she fled Philadelphia in desperate haste, that she was running toward something rather than merely away. But now, as the ranch came into view against the darkening sky, Theodora Sullivan Walsh knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she was meant to be and who she was meant to be with. Isaac drew the buggy to a halt before the cabin, now decorated with evergreen boughs and candles in the windows to welcome them home. Before Theodora could move to descend, he gathered her into his arms. "Welcome home, Mrs. Walsh," he said softly, his voice rich with promise. And as he carried her across the threshold into their shared future, Theodora knew that this moment, this man, this life was the beginning of her greatest adventure yet.